Good evening and welcome to the Hero's Breath podcast. I am your lovely host, Matthew Huddle.
And I am your other lovely host, Tom Zinsky.
The recording date is Tuesday, November 13th, 2018. This is episode 6. Tonight we will be discussing the belly of the whale. Well, we got two things to talk about. First is housekeeping.
The podcast is brought to you by the Mind Program at the Phi Center. Mind Program's basically just focusing on making you the best you that you can possibly be. So it's all about optimizing mental performance.
It's a proprietary neurofeedback system, and it's freaking amazing. I've been doing it for now 30 weeks.
My favorite clients.
I love this guy.
Honestly, of most people who've been coming in, I definitely think you've been taken away. And also just because you have the self-awareness. And with neurofeedback, you usually tend to see results in maybe like 15-20 sessions. It also requires a level of self-awareness where you're coming in and you have an idea of where you want to go. Mm-hmm. In your case, though, you have such a deep level of self-awareness, so you notice these things instantly. Whether or not I see improvements in terms of like the brainwave activity, are they personally noticing it? That's the big question. Like, what are they taking out of it? And it requires a certain level of self-awareness going in to really kind of assess where you're at.
So I've been doing a video journal on my YouTube channel. There's a playlist with my Mind Program journals. You can see all my results. But the coolest thing is, last week I went in for a second brain mapping. You start with one to see where your brain's at, and then you have another in the middle, and then another at the end. Comparing the way my brain looked, it was like a North Korean city at night.
When you threw that metaphor out, I was just like, what the fuck, man? Like, that was like on point.
That's exactly what it looked like, because then you look at the second set, and my brain's lit up like a fucking Christmas tree. And here's the thing, it matches to what I've been feeling and what I've been experiencing. This is the supernatural aid. Not necessarily magic, it could be scientific. It gets the hero past something they couldn't do themselves, and this is helping so much.
A tool, in this case, a tool. And so supernatural aid basically is just coming in from the outside. It's outside of.
Yes, exactly, it's external. Make sure you check out phicenter.nyc for more information, or
That's
you can go
PHI Center.nyc.
Yes. And the second, you'll be hearing this a few weeks out from when we recorded it.
Yesterday on November 12th, we received word that our beloved Stan Lee, who given us an entire universe of heroes, has unfortunately passed away.
He was, by all accounts, sharp as a tack to the very end, creative, expansive. I want to talk about a dynamic presence. Honestly, it doesn't feel like using hyperbole when I say it feels like a god has died, because he really created worlds. In some cases, he licensed characters. He brought things into this universe, this magnificent realm. When we talk about the hero's journey, we talk about the characters and the stories, because that's really how it reflects. You gotta stop for a second and consider the person he was to bring so many characters into one universe, so many stories in, license stories off to different writers, and to make it work in a way that was, you read for decades and decades and decades. Stories get stale, stories get stagnant, all comic universes have to reset, and he always oversaw those operations with such deftness, such skill. I don't know of anyone who has had such an impact on the cultural foundational settings of our entire Western civilization. And I don't think that's an exaggeration.
These are our modern mythologies.
Yes.
These are the heroes that we aspire to be, who represent those internal struggles that each and every one of us faces. Certain things become stagnant and they need to be reworked and redone, but at the core,
it always stayed true. I think Stan Lee, even if he wasn't necessarily always consciously aware of keeping to the mythos, because Campbell didn't publish his work until 1949, and by then Lee was already up and running, I think really the hero's journey channeled through him.
Yeah, and you know what?
Right?
What it is, because it's a part of our collective subconscious, right? It's already there. It's just endemic to the human spirit, a part of our own development. That's why we do connect with these stories, because it's all there.
He was immortal in life, and I think now with his passing, he's been completely and utterly immortalized.
Absolutely. For all ages.
We couldn't expect him to live forever, but in many literal senses, he is living forever.
Every single day, I think we should be questioning the kind of legacy we're all leaving. Most of us are not trying to leave the ordinary world, cross the threshold.
Right.
Most of us are not initiating and not following the call to action. Does it have to be grandiose? No. You don't have to be a Stan Lee. but you can be the Stan Lee of your own life, of your own story.
That's a great way of putting it. I think Stan Lee's legacy is encapsulated in that one word he said all the time, Excelsior. All right, so that's about all I can do with dry eyes. All right, so we're talking about the belly of the whale. As we mentioned in the overview, I was looking over that, and I realized I kind of fell into the same trap I think a lot of people do when we're analyzing the hero's journey. I kind of blended stage 6 and 7 together, belly of the whale, road of trials. It's very easy to do. Once I started writing it and analyzing it, I realized we have to keep these separate.
And it's a fair mistake, because I found myself honestly trying to figure out what examples I could think of. It's hard to actually fully articulate, because I feel like the belly of the whale motif itself is present in other stages, like multiple times. Like you can find yourself in that mini sort of cycle in all these other stages. One that immediately came to my mind is Luke's descent into the cave.
I knew you were going with that. That's one of your favorite images in all of
really
cinema.
Is,
I know.
But of course, that's not his first moment in, right?
No.
So, like, even though he's on this whole hero's journey, right? Like, there's multiple instances where you find yourself in these situations.
It either happens immediately after crossing the threshold, or there's a delay. Now, immediately is in, like, The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy's house, sets down, and she steps out of it, and she's right away in this new world. Star Wars, there was a delay. Luke accepts the call to adventure. He crosses the threshold when he gets on that Millennium Falcon and they take off. But then there's that travel to where they thought would be Alderaan, and that's when they get sucked into the Death Star. That's the belly of the whale moment in Luke's story.
And I find it not only in Luke's story, but Obi-Wan's. In that moment when they're in the Death Star, right? They kind of share that, because he does go into his own new
and then he goes even
initiation
deeper.
and rebirth.
Yeah, he does.
And so, like,
and then when he then when he gets
and so
when he surrenders in the battle with Darth.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other part of the belly of the whale is that it's actually broken down to 3 segments: envelopment, initiation, and rebirth. Once Obi-Wan was in the Death Star, he went deeper into it, into that shield generator area. Then he got the sense that Darth Vader was near. That was his initiation moment. And then the rebirth is when he surrendered to Darth Vader in the saber battle, and then eventually becomes a Force ghost. The example I was thinking of when I was writing this was Neo in the Matrix. He gets enveloped by the mirror. His signal is located, his initiation, and then the rebirth when he comes out of the pod and he's taken up onto the Nebuchadnezzar. The pill itself is crossing the threshold.
Right.
Morpheus says, this is your last moment to go back. Then he tells Neo it's part, the mentor tells Neo it's part of a tracer program. And that whole setup with him getting hooked up with, the EKG and everything else, and they're all analyzing his signal and everything. And you see this mirror material slowly creeping up his hands, slowly creeping up his body, and they're looking for him. Not Cypher, the other dude, the Hispanic dude. He was just like, still don't have him, I still don't have him, and Morpheus is on the phone, and it was all to initiate him. As he's getting enveloped, the initiation phase is finding his signal, figure out what pod he's in, where he is. In the real world, Neo doesn't know this all yet. The moment that the other guy says, locked, I got him, you notice all that material that's slowly creeping by suddenly goes much faster and just sucks it, and then the camera angle goes down his throat. And you see it all happen really, really fast, and you hear that de-resolution sound.
I would want to bring up one of your favorite heroes, Cat. When he first has his transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. He goes into the pod. And he's injected with everything. I think what you're talking about, when they blast him with the Vita rays, he didn't so much go enveloped by darkness. The sterling, perfect soldier that he was, the good man, was actually enveloped by light, which was really driving home that character motif about who the character of Steve Rogers, the super soldier, really is. So then when he emerges reborn and taller,
that's where his trials begin, though.
Exactly. And right away he was in the belly of the whale, because you see him, and the movie did a great job with this. He goes running out after the Hydra agent, and he's like, oh my god, I can run. Oh my god, I can jump over fences. Oh my,
shit, I'm strong. What?
Right. And he had never seen that, but he just goes right into it. Like, he was really thrust into that world. As soon as he had that rebirth, he was gone, getting and gone. But I like how you brought that up. And this is what separates Belly of the Whale and Road of Trials. It's very hard to separate what's an initiation ritual and what's a trial. Frat houses, they all have initiation rituals. Even Freemasonry, we have an initiation ritual. It can be trying, it can be, a bit alarming, but you're not pushed anywhere close to your limits. It's usually somewhat safe. In Captain America's case, no, it wasn't all that safe, but it wasn't anything close to what he had to deal with later on. Yeah. But it was that initiation into this new realm of being the super soldier. The difference in our own lives, as we're going to get into, is we often think that any trial, any bad times, is like a real test, is like a real road of trials, but it's sometimes it's just pushing us a little bit. It's a hazing in many cases, but we don't see it in the moment, only if we pull out a little bit. But humans are very myopic, so oftentimes we conflate the two, and I think that's why in analysis people do the same thing. With what Campbell said about the hero's journey, it's a journey of transformation. So when we're talking about the allegory of what this is, the symbology, we take for granted this stuff. I had to almost rewrite this because I forgot I left out the whole point. What is the belly of the whale itself? It's journeying into the subconscious and unconscious minds.
Unconscious, it's just pure unawareness, versus subconscious, it's really diving deep into the recesses of the mind. There's a whole lot of processes there.
It's like just under the surface.
It's a part of ourselves that makes itself manifest, and it does appear through us, but it's just outside of our awareness. So the subconscious holds everything. Honestly, like 98% of the decisions we make, the choices we make, the things that drive us on a day-to-day,
It's not conscious.
it's not conscious. And this is why I love practices that cause us to dive deep in. Things like neurofeedback, meditation, journaling, even what we're doing, just talking this stuff out.
Yeah.
And our brains, they choose to remember certain details, they choose to suppress others and repress others. A lot that gets unprocessed. One of the things that we do with neurofeedback, we have that one alpha theta protocol, is get your brain into an alpha theta state where the conscious and subconscious mind meet. It allows for things from the subconscious begin to arise. Traumas and emotions, very often, almost always, they steer the direction that we're going. They prevent us from taking certain actions, or they encourage inaction.
Or they influence our behavior.
Right. There's a lot of self-sabotage. So often the case that we don't know why the hell we do certain things and why the hell we keep getting in our own way. But I don't want to say it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Oh, that's a good way of phrasing it. I like that.
To start to notice, to become aware, to start to work a little more deeply with these things. Forgive what needs to be forgiven, to move on, to let go of what needs to be let go of, to free yourself up for the potential, for the possibilities, to simply not be in your own way, to really kind of open you up for whatever it is that you need to do, whatever it is you want to do on your hero's path.
Last year, when I had my old channel and I was blogging at that point, I was recounting the fact that there were a lot of old tapes, old programming from my family's faith that were still in my head, affecting my behavior. Now, those were all subconscious, and I'm willing to bet a lot of it unconscious. One of the things I did when I was writing this, I'm like, shit, I forgot to mention this. So I went in and I was like looking for the differences. Subconscious can affect your behavior on a more superficial level. It's like, why did I snap at so-and-so at work today? On one level, you could say it's because, they've been bothering me for a while and I didn't really address it. And then subconsciously, maybe I've just kind of let this stuff build up. That's subconscious. Unconscious is they remind me of my dad. Between the two.
It's triggers.
Triggers, yes.
Don Miguel Ruiz gives this analogy of a skin disease. Imagine we're all walking around with a skin disease, right? The moment someone touches you, you're in a lot of pain. Is this exterior that, like, when people poke at it, it causes us pain, and we're not aware that we had the skin disease. Go through life, and we're hurt by others, we're hurt by situations, things that occur because they're poking at certain parts that
But it's our disease.
Right? This is something that we start to pile on, again, from the moment we're born, all these programmings, all these wounds, all these traumas. And maybe you went to reach for the cooking jar, and you got hit at that very early moment in your development. That might have been a super traumatic moment.
Not that one moment is going to trigger an eating disorder, but it's going to be it's going to be in the composite of things that gets stored
imprint
in our brain. Yeah.
Mom didn't mean anything by it. It was just like a small little, but to you as a child, that might have been a big thing. You don't know what you don't know. That's why it's so important to dive deep in. Let those things come out of the subconscious mind into the conscious awareness, so that way you're able to work with them and work through them.
And that's leading right into the pattern here with this podcast is we dissect, we analyze the movie, and then I rip open the gaping wound that is my life, where we last left our hero. So I left the faith, had my meeting with the guardians of the threshold, and I crossed the threshold, and I'm no longer of this religion anymore. Now, I found myself entering into some situations with which I had little familiarity or understanding of the nuances of proper behavior. Well, it's true, I had my bouts with alcoholism before. I was in a different situation. I was with people I really knew very well. We were basically just drinking in basements and, back alleys. It really wasn't the same because I was still, I was still going to parties and stuff, 18, 19, whatever. But I had these social mores, this Christian faith I had to uphold. I still had to go to church on Sunday, drink it Friday, Saturday night, and go to church on Sunday. I had to make sure my precious Christian virginity was kept intact and wasn't very
guilt
hard.
And shame are some of the worst,
Yeah, it was totally keeping me, restricted. Right. What I would do is I would just drink to the point where nobody expected me to behave like a proper human being. No girl would fuck me because, she might bed the weirdo, she might bed a drunk, but she's not going to bed a weird drunk. So I was safe.
Was this also a way that you created this additional shield, this additional armor around yourself to actually prevent you
from being intimate with anybody?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. I had not really crossed the threshold. I was just kind of teenage rebellion, that kind of shit. I was just a little later. I was doing it at 18, 19. Move forward, I'm about 24. I really leave the faith. I have no ties to this Christian religion anymore. But now I'm a little older. Now I'm driving my friends most of the time. I gotta stay sober a lot of the time. As a semi-responsible adult, now I'm really fucking uncomfortable. I don't know how to behave. I was raised by a couple of nerds, loving nerds, but nerds nonetheless. Was very poorly associated with. The programming I was given from the pulpit was very different than what actually applies to the real world. We were locked in our own little world. Now I'm free of all that, and I don't know what the fuck to do.
Well, bottom line, we're all locked in our own little world. I'm not trying to detract from what you're saying, but just to extrapolate from that a little bit, you were able to step outside of that in a very real way. We're all called upon to do so as well in our own individual personal lives internally.
And you're right. So for me, it was kind of magnified. And I actually make that point later on. Now I had no idea how to interact with people in many ways. I was always very clumsy and awkward, and I had to feel it. Most of the time I was driving. Most of my loser friends around. No offense if they're actually listening. But the big problem for me was I had no idea how to interact with the opposite sex, especially because that was such a big no-no from whence I came. I always figured that there'd be some process or methodology. And really there's just the one, which is relax, be yourself, be in the moment, and enjoy her. I had no clue how to do any of that, even if somebody had told me back then. And to be perfectly blunt, I'm not that much better with women anyway, even now. But I'm at least willing to admit that. When I look back on that time, how Dr. Peterson says the situation like a party is like a dragon. It's this agent of chaos. It will consume you and devour you if you don't behave properly. So now I'm in this new world, and I have to stay awake and pay attention and aim up and speak truth and pet cats and everything he says in 12 Rules for Life. There were all these beasts lurking everywhere. And many times I would go into situations and I would get brutally mocked or ostracized or made fun of and whatever. In that moment, I could look at it as a trial, but in reality, I was just being initiated. I don't blame anyone for treating me badly at that point because, like you said, everyone's in their own head. There's a hierarchy in every situation you go into, whether it's a small situation or a big one. There was this kind of script. It was test the newcomer. If he passes, accept him. If he doesn't, extract resources from him and drive him away. It was like a roughneck baptism. Throw the loser into the deep end of the lake and see if he comes up. This is endemic to nature. This is endemic to human interactions. Dr. Peterson talks about this many times in his books and lectures. Children's development, how they need to be properly associated with. And if a child doesn't learn to associate themselves properly, they're going to have a much harder time as an adult. I was being thrust into the world as a supposed adult, but I had to now learn the lessons that I should have learned as a child. I was really being given a clean slate. If I would go to a bar, I didn't just go to a bar by myself. I went to a bar with a bunch of friends to their bar, or to this bar, or to that party, and people would introduce me as, that's my friend Matt, he just got out of a cult. We're literally how I was introduced for like a year. So now I had to pass or swim on my own, and most of the time I sank.
One thing you mentioned earlier is kids. There is a lot of research coming out now with the consequences of helicopter parenting as well, also with technology use, excessive social media use. Skyrocketing incidents of suicide, anxiety, depression among very young groups. In fact, it does rewire the brain differently. We're social creatures. We need physical,
stimulation.
Physical contact. We need to be able to engage in play and development and creativity. So if any of you have children of your own,
please don't fuck them up.
Please don't fuck them up.
Sorry.
Another belly of the whale occasion I think many people go through is college.
Hence a lot of the drinking.
I'm listening to your story. It gives me that impression of the individual who leaves home. Before they enter that new world, there's your college years. This whole little belly of the whale, going in, getting initiated and coming out reborn as something new with a clean slate ready to approach the next step. I'm throwing this example out so that way maybe it gives a little more context for people to try to see where
That's
they
exactly
are
it.
or what it is that the belly of the whale really represents.
Like we talked about before, you cross the threshold in a story. If there's a little door, like a Stargate or something to go through, it's still emblematical of that crossing into that unconsciousness, facing those dragons, those monsters lurking. For me, like I said, I didn't have an identity. Besides the guy who just got out of a cult, that was my identity. So I was really a clean slate, and I couldn't really stand on my own 2 feet because I was still a baby in many respects. So I latched on to whatever alpha male would accept me. As basically a lackey, and I did this a couple of times in different groups. Whatever group I kind of drifted into, I just kind of attached for a while, and that persons had used me, looking back, very humiliating kind of ways. The details aren't really all that important. Nothing sexual, I promise, except for that one time. And I could look at myself as being a victim, right? Because I didn't have the self-awareness, other people took advantage of my kind nature and used me for their own ends. They were operating off a very primitive and simple script. This is what you do with a newcomer. Really all that was an initiation. And as I got more awareness, as I started to learn what I did and didn't like, I had to also learn what external symbols really fit me. When I was a kid, my friends and I would play superheroes. I remember this one time, we're all deciding which heroes we're going to be. I picked up this little gun and I said, I'm going to be the Punisher. And all my friends laughed at me. My friend ripped the gun out of my hand, gave me a garbage can lid and said, stand over there, Cap, the game's going to start. Captain America has always been me. You got to imagine if Captain America had no memory and was suddenly thrust out into the world. And a credit to my ex-wife and still best friend, Lauren, because she was like many people that I do owe a lot to. Some real friends I had made at the time who really did kind of take pity on me and really did help me out. She was the one girl who did bed the weirdo and the drunk. She lost a lot of social currency in that. As we broke up, I found out, not so much that she lost friends, but she lost a lot of face with me. I feel bad about that, but what the fuck else was I gonna do? I didn't have anything else to really give in that respect. I had to learn. As I've come into this sense of self-awareness, as I've realized that I'm not a beta male lackey bitch boy, I'm a fucking alpha dog myself. But I didn't know that. I had to learn that. I had to learn where my place was in the hierarchy. I had to learn that I don't go into every situation swinging my dick and having to be the big dog. I'm now that secure that I don't need to prove myself in a room.
So Peterson expands on the whole idea of the meek shall inherit the earth.
The real translation of that.
The real translation where he's really saying those who carry swords.
And who know when to sheathe them and when to unsheath
Exactly.
them. I use the phrase, and we talked about this, top and bottom alphas. An alpha male is an alpha male. An alpha male is the man who's in charge, who knows what to do, who sets the tone, who sets the mood, who everyone looks to in the room. Our president, Donald Trump, is a great example of a true alpha male. Everyone looks at him in the room, they understand how he moves and everything else. One event he went to and he supposedly shoved some leader aside, but he didn't. He gave him like a man hug and everyone looked at him. He was really in command of that room, but he always has to be at the front of that room. He always has to prove people wrong. He has to throw stones at every barking dog, and he has to swing his dick around because he's a bottom alpha.
Right. It's
He has to prove it. Right.
It's an immature alpha. It's an immature man.
But a top alpha lets other people take the lead if they seem to know what they're doing, because he doesn't have to prove himself. If that person stumbles, he'll either push him aside and say, all right, I'm gonna have to do everything, or he's like, you could try this, and okay, go ahead, you keep taking the credit because I just don't care.
He empowers him.
Right. That's what a top alpha does, is empower the people
That's
around
what
them.
he should be doing.
That's what all alphas should be doing, but not everybody is. But this was all stuff that I had to slowly, develop. I had my envelopment, my, sinking down, going into those bars and those house parties, into that darkness, being initiated by being teased and mocked and, kind of used and tried by all the monsters that I had to face there. My rebirth, I don't really think happened until I was married. Then I was in charge of my own house. I was in charge of my own tribe. For my ex and I, our first apartment really became a real haven. We called it the Oasis. In fact, that was on the Wi-Fi. Because all our friends who maybe didn't have the best house situation or had like shitty jobs, they'd come, they'd play with the cats, they'd pet the little human. They would take solace where we were. And I was in charge of my own little kingdom. Of course, I had to go and fuck that up by drinking every moment since I said I do, but that's a lamentation for the next podcast. Again, I bear this out because I know, like you said, you could give broad examples, going to college and everything else. I really think that there's, I hope, going to be people who listen to this who went through really weird shit, really weird upbringings, and go, I'm not the only person who had to go through this bullshit at like 25, 35.
It's funny because at the end of the day, it really is like the family cult. And whether there's like some religious component implemented or whatever the case is, there's a structure that you're eventually going to leave, physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually and every kind of leave. And that's really where that transformation begins, because like I think that's what's important about this whole idea of the belly of the whale, is that it's this moment of transformation, and it's going to be replicated and repeated, these many moments of transformation. I'll throw this out there to all of you as an experiment. Go floating. So flotation therapy has been around for decades. Now they've just become very good at
marketing it
for one. I mean, and Joe Rogan, I think, is a huge reason. The whole flotation industry really owes him a lot, because he's always talking about it, and so he really kind of helped spread the word around it. We have a few places here on Long Island now, and one place that I've been going to, Floatopia in Dix Hills. The thing is, they know how to do it right now. Fully pitch black, skin temperature, water, thousands of pounds of just Epsom salt. You're just floating there, full sensory deprivation. It's incredible. Like, talk about going into the belly of the whale. What it does also allow for you to do is to then go internally. You're floating there. Try to see where the mind goes. Let everything go. It's just you and the mind. Start to play around with thoughts that are there, things that are coming up.
I heard you can dream with your eyes open, like you hallucinate without enough sensory stimulation.
Yeah, I mean, have I been there? No.
I'm willing to bet I will trip balls if I go in.
I guarantee you people do.
I'm very susceptible. I'm very susceptible.
I know you are.
Yeah, he's literally seen the inside of my brain. He knows how susceptible I am to changes like this.
No, you're very sensitive. Like, you're one of those people who, like, immediately after a neurofeedback session, you just start, like...
How many times have you seen me walk out of there sideways? No, like, literally, there are some sessions I'm like...
I mean, last time you came out, you were just spitting fire with those analogies and metaphors.
Oh my god, yeah! And then other times, I'm in, like, a complete stoner daze. Like, I sit in my car for 20 minutes because I'm like, if I drive, I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. Like, I'm gonna get pulled over, it's like, son, what do you want? I'm like, the mind program.
You're very sensitive in a good way.
Not in a snowflake way.
If you have places close to you where you could try something like that out, I encourage you, give it a shot. You will come out transformed in one way or another.
How many sessions have you done?
3 or 4.
How long are they usually? An hour?
Depending on where you go. Where I've been doing it, 90 minutes. Some places will even go 2 hours. Other places will give you like a 30 minutes just to try it out, or 60 minutes. But it's a great experience. Even if you're just going in there and maybe got some stress, anxiety, depression, shit, maybe you have magnesium deficiency. Well, guess what? That Epsom salt will cure you right away.
Just being in that relaxed state, in that floating state.
Yeah, and so what it does, it also helps encourage the production of alpha waves. So delta waves are the slowest ones. Get into a more state. But then your brain does ramp up activity over the course of the night, and so you'll come in and out when you're meditating, for example. And different kinds of meditation will do things differently for you. But for example, Zen meditation and other types will generate alpha brainwave activity, and really is this sort of like calm, level-headed, open state. If meditation isn't your thing and you got a flotation place close by, give it a shot.
A good segue to a real good point, and something we keep talking about is meditation. There's it was a Nat Geo, I think, documentary series called Light at the Edge of the World. Brilliant documentarian. He went to different places around the world to learn some of the wisdom from these remote cultures. And one of them, I must have watched it a couple of dozen times. He went to Tibet. Or Nepal, I think, really. He was talking with these monks, one of the Rinpoches and his acolytes. There's this French monk, this French Buddhist monk. He's been there for, I don't know, decades. I forget his name, but he's actually been, I think he did a TED Talk not that long ago. Like, I've seen him elsewhere. And he was saying how, in the Western world, we're always looking to escape. He says people are always running away from themselves. We're telling them to go meditate and go into themselves. And they say, no, I don't want to do that. And he goes, it's better than any movie you could possibly pay to go see. Bringing actually back to Stan Lee, is a lot of people have been saying, thank you for helping me escape. You made all these worlds I would escape to. I don't want to take from anyone, so I'm not going to be that asshole who comments, but I just wanted to say, fucking no! It's not an escape. He reflected our deepest, most unconscious utterings. Stan Lee carried on a tradition that stretches back before we had written language. Yeah. Before we had opposable thumbs. Stan Lee carried that on. He didn't make a world for you to escape to, you ninnies. I think I isolated our audience.
You're not ninnies, we love you. He created a mirror, a reflection of your internal state, that a state that you may not even be fully conscious of.
You could sit in the movie theater, you could open a comic book, you could watch a cartoon, and you could delve into your mind. And that's something I think I always felt an affinity for. That's why I felt such kinship with these characters.
Right.
It wasn't, and I think that's where a lot of other people who really work on progress. Like you talk to a lot of these guys like, Aubrey Marcus and Tim Ferriss and they're, all these progress guys, all these motivational guys, but they're all nerds. Look at fucking Vin Diesel. He still plays D&D, but he's obviously a guy who went through a lot of progress, a lot of transformation. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, like he went through a lot of these developmental stages, and they're all nerds at heart. We're all geeks together. We read these comics. We know these stories. That's why I laugh when people talk about the start of Marvel Studios taking a risk on these obscure stories like Iron Man. I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Obscure? What kind of market research do these assholes do?
Did you grow up as a child? What are you watching, reading, listening to?
We were born at 50. So when you're talking about meditation, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a flotation tank. You get into that state where you're connecting with something deep and unconscious. You become very consciously aware of something at a subconscious level. So you're sitting there, you're watching Thor smash things around and go through this journey and lose his eye and all this stuff, and you're sitting there in the theater. Some part of your brain, it's almost like the mind program in this sense, like your parts of your brain are talking to each other and seeing that reflection. That's your kind of character.
You ever leave one of those movies and suddenly you're just so fucking motivated
right.
and you're ready to take on the world? Because it taps that inside
yes.
of us. This deep yearning, like you called it before. Crave that, we desire. That's why we seek this out. Going back to what you're saying about meditation, it's so necessary that we get comfortable with discomfort.
Okay.
To backtrack, you were saying people consider an escape. For some, it actually kind of is. They are trying to really escape their lives, seeking distractions. We don't want to stay quiet for a single moment, so we're constantly looking for activities and things to engage in and
Guilty.
with. And whether it's drug abuse, alcohol abuse, feeling compelled to turn on the radio because you cannot stand to drive to your next destination, whether it's 5 minutes away or 5 hours away. We need to constantly have something going on so we don't sit with ourselves. You grow through trials and you grow through these difficult things. Well, in this case, the difficult thing is to really be with yourself, to actually analyze and question the things that are coming up inside your mind. Okay, question.
Yeah.
And the quality of your life is going to be determined by the quality of the questions you're asking yourself, the quality of the questions you're asking of others, and ultimately the quality of your own thoughts. How can you gain better quality thoughts? Through practices like meditation, through being mindful, increasing the awareness of those things that are coming up from your subconscious into the conscious mind. Just try to assess, okay, why the hell am I just simply responding and reacting to this thing? Where's this emotion coming from? What is it telling me? Then you can actually start to change the quality of your thoughts that arise because you have more control over them.
This is why I sometimes get a little sad that I can't get depressed anymore.
Shit. I'm so sorry.
Because what you just said, being aware of those thoughts. When you're depressed, when you suffer from depression, I'm talking about like a chemical, like you don't realize all your thoughts are in the negative zone. Like you don't realize, like that's dysthymia. It's just slow progress into the darkness. Nothing is right and everything's wrong and you suck and life sucks and everything sucks. Not that I'm going to blow my brains out, but I'm going to joke about it a lot. Because that's how I deal with it, or that's how I dealt with it. Having that sudden awareness that I'm there. Once I learned how to use those dragons to my advantage, once I learned how to harness them, that like that Hozier song, don't you ever tame your demons, you just keep them on a leash. For me, for the depression, was when it would pull me. It would let me know when I was getting off track. If I could be aware, not that I often was, but if I could be aware that it was starting to go down that way. So once I started the mind program, I would be aware. At first, I was just aware that my head was going in those directions. Then it would start going down those deep, dark directions and then stop. Then eventually, like I said a couple weeks ago, I was like, I went to look for the path. It was like there's like a sealed up door. Where's my comfy, ratted, destroyed, disease-ridden bed? It's gone. Not that I can't get down or negative, but it's just there's no way to stay there.
That's essentially where you want to be.
That's where I've always wanted to be, but like I said, I was used to having that as one of my guides, and that guidepost isn't there anymore, so obviously I have to come up with something else. This is why the whole reason I'm bringing all this up is because, like you said, we have to question, and we have to be aware, and we have to start really being that present. Mm-hmm. So when we see these movies, when we read Stan Lee's creations, and we live in that world, even if we are escaping in it, again, And this goes back to what Hero's Breath is. Why does that character, or why do these types of characters draw you? Why are you always being a rogue? Were you always raised to be a good, dutiful son by your overbearing mommy and made sure you put your plate away and kept you in the rules, or an overbearing father? What was it that makes you go to the other end? Or is there something comforting in the way you were? Maybe you're drawn to a character like Captain America because he's such a good, Boy Scout, although many times he isn't, because he's got that moral compass that the law doesn't necessarily have to abide by, but that's a whole subject for another blog. What do these characters really say to you when you go down into that belly of the whale, when you really go down into that subconscious and unconscious mind? You're asking those really frightening questions that you might not want the answer to. And this might be a credit to Stanley's legacy, is you can use these characters as a kind of avatar for you. Analyze the characters that draw you when you're going down into that kind, and you can enter that kind of meditative state if you're going to use them for like a filter, at least for now. Before you start asking yourself the harder questions, analyze these characters. Use them for your analog before you start getting down that dark path.
I'll give you an example just from personal experience. Not that I necessarily ascribe to astrology. In some cases, it's scary fucking accurate. But based on the Chinese zodiac, I'm a metal goat. Based on the Western astrological calendar, I'm a Scorpio. Both of those signs, super envious and jealous creatures. Also can be smart, passionate, driven, and all those different things that I also do find myself embodying, but some of these more negative attributes as well, so strong within me. And I, even from a very young age, I remember I would be sitting there thinking, like, why the hell am I feeling so envious about this situation? Why am I so jealous of this individual? So is it insecurity? Is it this? Is it that? In some cases it was. One thing I realized is when these negative emotions pop up, they're incredible tools and guides. I can say now without a doubt that I'm grateful to have that sort of nature built into me. I'm even more grateful now that I can become aware of it, so I can distance myself from the actual feeling, assess what it's trying to tell me, so it becomes a tool. All of these negatives that we experience in our lives, all these negative emotions and situations, these are potential opportunities for growth, for learning. And so it's good to treat them that way. Even something like depression, as bad as it was, it also gave you a compass of sorts.
There's almost always a trigger, at least for me, and I know for a lot of, some forms of depression, you just wake up that way. There would always be something I would use to think on, to chew on, like a dog chewing on an old bone, to try to make sure I stay down there. Also analyzing something. My friends hate watching movies with me because I was a hyper-analytical extrovert, which means I had to analyze Michael Bay action movies, dissect them like we do now with all this stuff, but I couldn't do that in my head. So everyone in the room had to fucking suffer through me. Like, we'd pause the movie to, so everyone could take a bathroom break, but that pause would last for half an hour because I had to talk it out. One of the great things about what we're doing here is that we're actually able to give that kind of an outlet. I encourage everyone to find that outlet, a channel with which you can direct your thoughts and go into that analytical state without having to go into a negative state or aggravate the ever-living shit out of all your friends. Don't isolate yourself, unless you're going into a flotation tank, in which case you're going to isolate yourself for only 60 to 90 minutes at a time. There are going to be some very dark parts of your journey. Try to be as objective as possible. I want to table objectivity for the next round when we come back to this.
And see those also as parts of the journey, as necessary, essential components that are actually moving you forward, whether it feels like it or not. We always see things in hindsight. Have faith that is there to serve you. It's up to you to see how.
And to be as clear as possible, be objective. Don't think that just because you're being tried or you're being tested that this is necessarily a trial. It's oftentimes just an initiation. Wherever you are, wherever you know you can't go backwards, if you're at that point in your journey now, and you're being tested, you're being tried, just go through it and realize you haven't even hit the fun part yet. You haven't even hit the real road of trials yet. We're going to be talking about that in the next podcast, what the road of trials actually is, how much it actually fucking hurts, and a lot of times, who's responsible.
So I said this in the last pod, and I'm going to repeat it. Everything's going to be okay in the end.
If it's
not
not okay,
okay,
it's
not the end. So I leave you with that.
From Matt
and Tom,
I want to wish you well and remind you that you're still the hero.
have a good night.
Take care, everybody.